Today, I have the honor of welcoming you to the celebration of life for Dr. Tracy Elizabeth Tiefenbach. For those of you who have not met me, I am Tracy's stepsister, Sarah. On behalf of Tracy's family, I would like to thank everyone who has reached out to offer their support and condolences over the last few days. Your love and support have really meant a lot to everyone. I would like to thank you all for being here today and to those of you who are joining us virtually. As a group, Tracy has entered our lives in many ways, including as a student, a colleague, a friend, a confidant, a cousin, a niece, an aunt, a sister, a daughter, and more. No matter what role Tracy had in her life, I'm sure that we can all agree that knowing Tracy was a gift. As difficult as her passing is for everyone, as we think and talk about Tracy today, I think it's important that we all remember that yes, Tracy was incredibly intelligent, and she was creative, and she was passionate, but what Tracy ultimately really loved was to smile, laugh, and have a good time. Now, in interest of full disclosure, I have to let you know that Lisa and I were talking yesterday as we were trying to plan things. And Lisa mentioned Tracy's talent for foreign accents. There was a suggestion that perhaps I could incorporate some into today's service. However, after being told that my Russian accent sounded like a pirate, we've agreed that perhaps we won't do that. Although I really think I could have rocked the eye patch. It was exactly this kind of banter yesterday with Lisa that reminded me of when I first met Tracy and her sister Lisa, many years ago at our very first family holiday together. I hadn't heard too much about either of them, except of course that the two of them were full of many stories about their shenanigans. Let's just say they lived up to their reputations. It was also clear that night that Marty was very proud of Tracy and loved the joy for life that Tracy had. At that first family gathering, it was obvious that Tracy certainly had the potential to be my partner in crime. Although that role was already expertly filled and aggressively guarded by Lisa. Getting to know Tracy more over the years, as a stepsister, not a real sister, I continue to be amazed at Tracy's willingness to put herself in the spotlight, her ambition, and absolute determination to chase after what she wanted. Not to mention the amazing smile that always graced her face. We will all have sadness in our hearts today and joy as we think of Tracy. So today we actually have a number of people who will come up and speak to share their memories. Some might make us cry and others may make us laugh. The first person we'd like to welcome up is Tracy's mother, Marty. After she speaks, there will be a song played by Bette Midler where we can all reflect on Marty's words and our thoughts of Tracy.
In life, we must do things we do not like to do. Today is one of those days. I must honor my daughter with dignity and honesty. Tracy was a beautiful, bouncing baby girl, a terrible, terrible 2-year-old. First day of kindergarten, blink of an eye, graduating high school with honors. Acceptance into McMaster University. 11 long years later, graduating with her PhD. Tracy's success was compromised by self-medication that led her down a dark and confusing path. She tried to climb her way back up, but as we all know, sadly, the demons sometimes win. We are comforted in knowing she is free and is at peace with her brother Jamie. May they enjoy restful and eternal life. God rest your souls.
Oh
Teresa will now come up and share some memories of her sister and best friend.
So, first off, I'll say my speech could have gone one of three ways: sad and sweet, maybe angry and sad as well, or inappropriately, lamely, mildly humorous. And I've decided to go with the latter. And that's because whenever I was with Tracy, we laughed and had fun. Whether it was about losing our phone, dropping our phone in a toilet, getting lost looking for our phone, getting lost looking for a toilet, or whether it was about life-scarring childhood trauma. We made a joke out of it. There was nothing we couldn't laugh about. And I think that was the secret to our bond. Making very bad jokes helped us to cope with very bad times, and it also helped us enjoy the really good times. And so today, I really wanted to make my sister laugh with some of our funny stories and some of her funny stories. But I didn't want to offend so many of you out there, so I'm only going to make her chuckle. And so here it goes. So as you know, Tracy earned her PhD at McMaster. She was a brilliant scientist and spent the better part of her life in the lab. Eventually, I also went back to school. And so oftentimes I would do my studying at McMaster, even though that's not the university that I went to. And it was because that way we could spend time together on our breaks. And sometimes I even studied like in her lab. Don't know if that was allowed, but that was fun. So during breaks, we would complain and laugh about whatever was going on. Let's see, some other things we would do. We would find random objects and stick it in liquid nitrogen. That was not part of her experiments or her thesis. And again, I don't know if it was allowed, but we did that. Other times we would just chat on our breaks. For example, she might talk about her advisor, Dr. Marie Jeanette, who is here today. And so she would just, tell me about her day with Marie. So, for example, she would say how he was right on time in the office waiting for her for their scheduled meeting, so that they could review her thesis as planned. And kind words would ensue regarding his punctuality. She loved her lab and everyone in it. But some of those times were stressful. So after that particular time when there was, a very prompt meeting that had just taken place and covered everything that was supposed to happen, she needed to de-stress. And luckily there was a modern art sculpture taking place either in the university or the hospital. So we decided to take pictures with the sculptures, like with ourselves. And they were creative pictures. And by that I mean like bomb chicka bomb bomb kind of pictures. And so yeah, you wouldn't think that modern art sculptures could look ashamed, but they can. And so life was good again for us, not the art. So yeah, whether it was freezing stuff in liquid nitrogen, griping about colleagues or theses, or defiling art on camera in public, that was a typical day in the lab with Tracy. In addition to being a scientist, as you may know, Tracy had a gift and a passion for the arts. In fact, when she heard a literary piece that moved her, she could easily memorize it and then repeat it verbatim for years. Didn't matter how much time had passed, at a moment's notice. So I'll now read a small verse from a piece authored by two feminist artists that caught my sister's attention when she was a very young teenage girl coming of age in the 90s. So I'm going to read that passage now. You're packed and you're stacked, especially in the back. Brother, want to thank your mother for a butt like that. Can I get some fries with that shake, shake booty? If looks could kill, you would be an Uzi. You're a shotgun, bang. What's up with that bang? I want to know, how does it hang? Chocolate chip, honey dip, can I get a scoop? Baby, take a ride in my coupe. You make me wanna Anyone in the 90s knows. Shoot, yes. Classic feminist literary artwork there. So that was Salt and Pepper. And I exaggerate not, my sister knew every single word to every single verse. Some people are shaking their head. Drop of a hat. She did get it going. So Tracy was beautiful, intelligent, talented. In so many ways, as all of our friends, family, and her colleagues, fellow scientists here can attest. And actually, I'm just wondering, is anyone here who played basketball with her? Soccer? Golf? Tennis? Yeah, that's because she sucked at sports. My beautiful, talented, brilliant, creative sister was bad at one thing. It was probably the only thing that she was bad at, because she was nearly perfect at almost everything else. But she made up for it by being really, really, really bad at sports. So a story that she would tell that would get some laughs, so I'll try to do it justice, because she would have you laughing if she was here today, takes place in about 3rd grade in her gym class. And I guess basically the gym teacher had, given them all basketballs, and everyone had to whatever, make a basket. I clearly am also gifted in sports. So as soon as they were able to make the ball go through the basket, they could sit down. And then once everyone was sitting down, they were able to leave for recess early if they were done, early or not. So my sister was the last one standing, and she's shooting, and she does her impression of her 8-year-old self so well, so I'll try to do it justice. But eventually, she turns to her teacher at 8 years old and she says, "You and I both know this isn't gonna happen, right?" And the teacher was like, "Yeah, go out for that last 30 seconds recess you guys have left." And you think maybe she grew out of it? No. About 6 or 7 years ago, my boys who are here, her nephews, Brandon and AJ, they took us skiing. And so it was pretty much my sister's first time on skis. Quite an adventure. There was a lot of screaming, so getting on the ski lift, getting off of the ski lift, falling in front of the ski lift, screaming because you're afraid you're going to be run over at the ski lift. That was my sister for every single ski lift trip. And the boys were there quickly to pick her up and help her, get out of the line of danger. And so then her first run down the hill, does anyone know what the pizza is? So you angle your skis like this, and it helps you to push the snow so you can go down slowly. So the boys had sort of said, make sure you do pizza, Aunt Tracy. So she starts going, skis together, straight down the hill, screaming, "Ah!" And they're trying to catch up to her. They're like, "Aunt Tracy, pizza, 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 Aunt Tracy, pizza." She just keeps going, and I'm kind of watching this from behind because I'm pizzaing. And she goes past the ski lift, down this little ditch, slams into the fence, and I finally get down there. They're they have to take off their skis. They're trying to climb down this ditch. They're pulling her out of the fence because equipment's all stuck and it's in the snow. And I think at one point my one son actually fell down because he's trying to pick her up, and she's like, "Dead weight," she's all stuck, and then he falls and she falls on top of him. It was quite the sight. But we continued on. So a few more runs after, so that wasn't the worst of it. They were ahead of us, making their way down, and my sister has this fall, which by now she learns how to go slow. But this fall was incredible. Going at a slow speed on the bunny hill, but everything everywhere, skis, scarves, helmets, everything. So I'm like, boys, you have to help Aunt Tracy, and she's stuck somehow, and she can't get up. So they take off their skis and they go marching up the hill, up the side of the mountain, and they're trying to help her up. And they're trying to find all her stuff, which is literally all over the entire mountain, her scarf's in a tree. It's just, what did you do, Tracy? And they get her all dressed up and help her to go down. And believe it or not, that year my sister and I went back to the ski hall, just the two of us, several times, because as you will probably hear, my sister is the kind of person who will just keep trying to get something. So let's see, where am I now? That was the ski story. But the point is, like I just said, she could do almost anything. She almost skied, I'm telling you, by the end. A little less snow, a little more time, a little less fence, she could have got there. And you know, Tracy accomplished a lot of things that were difficult, even in the face of many challenges and hardships that I'm not even going to go into, but they were there. So some small, softer ones, I mean. For example, some of you already know, if you were here just a few weeks ago at our baby brother service, Tracy had to take care of our brother a lot. It was a single parent household. As I mentioned before, sometimes my mom was working till like 2 in the morning. This was when she was a young teenager. I was already out of the house with babies myself. And so Tracy was tasked with doing that. And she was also, as you know, like a social butterfly. And she wanted to also be out with her friends, and that was hard for her. So, you know, on a Friday or Saturday night, she would have to stay home with my brother, and she'd get him a big box of toys, set him up in his room, and then she'd go out with her friends. And she confessed this years later. And as a budding scientist, or a scientist at that point, she had a really logical explanation for this, and it's basically, you get what you pay for. But in all honesty, like, Tracy loved our little brother more than anything. She did help take care of him, and other than, you know, abandoning him to go to the party, for the most part, she did a really great job. They were really close. And in addition to her free child labor, she also had paid work, and she, during high school, almost worked full-time hours a number of years. She worked at Red Lobster as a server, and she also worked at a local bar as a server there as well. And so, honest to God, a typical day could be waking up bright and early, possibly helping get my brother ready, going to school, getting stellar grades, going to work, getting off work at 2 a.m., somehow still getting up the next day for school. And my sister probably never earned less than an A- in her life. She graduated, she got so many awards on her high school graduation for like top of this class, top of that class, like, you know, calculus board solver, I don't know what the names of the awards were. And she earned her way both academically and financially into McMaster. So that was incredible. But Tracy had other struggles too. Tracy struggled with a condition that maybe not all of you know about. One that a few of us in the family, myself included, have struggled with as well. And the signs first emerged in her senior year of high school, right around the time of her prom. I'll tell you a bit about that story. So it was prom night, and Tracy looked beautiful, as usual. And she was in good spirits, as usual, and getting ready for prom, and her date showed up. And he did not have a suit on. It did not look like he had showered recently, like, as in ever, maybe. And but Tracy had a positive spirit, and Mom went out of her way, found a suit for him to wear, and they went off to the prom. Later that night, there was a call. Tracy needed to be picked up because her ride was no longer available to bring her home. It turns out her prom date's cousin had gone into labor during the prom, and he had to leave, so she was there alone. So anyways, that stuff happens, you know, and the next day at school, as we would learn, Tracy was hearing all kinds of stories and congratulations that her boyfriend had become a father. So at this point, my sister's like, favorite cousin either means something a lot different than I think, or he was secretly having a baby that night. And that would be confirmed, and Tracy would go on to date this guy for 6 full months. And it was then that her condition was diagnosed and confirmed. Tracy would suffer from bad taste in men for years to follow. She was finally on her way towards health, but many, many years she struggled with that condition, as did I. Anyhow, I don't know how that happened, the whole, you know, how she came down with that condition, and I'm thinking maybe it all started with her first love that was unrequited. It was her first great true love, and she loved this man with all her soul, all her heart. It was Leonardo DiCaprio. And true story, Tracy confessed to me that as a young girl, she actually kissed his poster at night, and even once wrote him a letter. And Apparently he never wrote back his loss. But it wasn't like Tracy didn't have other good options, so I don't know what was up with the smelly baby daddy at the prom, but I mean, guys were literally falling at her feet all the time. All of them. And yeah, who can say why? Maybe it was her witty humor and her clever pickup lines. For example, Tracy would combine her scientific knowledge, her sharp wit, and her stellar confidence, and just walk up to a guy and say, hey, if I could be any enzyme, I'd be a helicase, because then I could unzip your genes. Did I say the right enzyme? It worked every time. So in hindsight, like, I don't know if men just really appreciated her prowess with biochemistry puns, or if it was because she was drop dead gorgeous. Who's to say? Maybe don't try that line at home on your own. But Tracy did love to go out and have fun. And in our 20s, especially, I would try to go to the bar with her a few times, but I was usually pregnant or breastfeeding. So I couldn't drink, but that didn't matter. We still were able to have a good time. I did not ever need a single drink to have a good time with Tracy, that's for sure. And we would make it an adventure, often combining her love of acting, our shared insanity, and our girls' night out to create a night of adventure. So for example, this is a true story on my children's lives, okay? Not gonna believe it, but it's true. So one time we found these like pioneer style kind of dresses at Value Village and like a bonnet, and we got dressed up like that, and we concocted a backstory. So we had, I don't even remember what our names were, but we were from Bass Lake, which may or may not exist, we made it up. And we were like Amish or Mennonite girls, and our grandmother Rosemary had just let us out for the first time so we could see the world. And we were entering a bar for the very first time, never even seen alcohol. Tracy was about 22 at this time. So we went to this bar, and Tracy walked up to this group of guys, and I'm kind of with her. She was such a good actress even then before her training, and she was like, this is our first time in the bar. She's like, what are you drinking? And they might say like, oh, Crown Royale with something. And she'd seem fascinated, like, really? I've never heard of that. And of course, what would they say? Can I buy you one? So this went on for the night. So she got to try a lot of alcohols for the very first time that night. It was super fun. It was just crazy. That's just what we were. And we told stories about Amish country, and we sold it somehow. But this is where the story gets good. So the next day, Tracy calls me and she's like, oh my God, I got a text from one of those guys at the bar. He wants to know if I'm back at Bass Lake, and if not, can he take me out? I'm like, really? And she's like, did I give my number to someone? I'm like, I don't think so. Like, I don't remember that happening. She's like, I must have. She's like, which guy do you think I gave my number to? Because it was like a group of them. I'm like, I don't know. So we were both like surprised and intrigued. And it seemed like an adventure. So she's like, I'm gonna go. I'm like, okay. You're gonna go on this mystery date with this guy. And I'm like, are you still gonna be the Amish girl? She's like, yeah, I think I'll play it up for one more day. So she goes on this date, and I kid you not, the name of the man that my Amish girl sister from Bass Lake went on with was Daryl Horn, her future husband. That is how Tracy and Daryl met. He's now her ex-husband because of that condition she suffers from. But there you go. I mean, who has an origin story for that, eh? So that was pretty funny. So yeah, my sister was the best friend I'll ever have. And we had fun doing just about anything, but even doing fun things was extra fun. So here's an example. We went to Wonderland once, and there's the drop zone. So if you know what that is, like you go up in the air and then it just drops you. So we're at the drop zone and we're getting strapped in, and my sister is busty, but just for the record, like it's all natural. But there was this young, pimply faced guy, attendant comes and he's starting to check the restraints, and my sister like looks at him dead serious, and she's like, points to the sign that says, if you have implants or a pacemaker, you shouldn't ride the ride. And she looks this guy down, a straight face, and she goes, excuse me, are my breast implants gonna explode on this ride? And I was like trying not to laugh because she could sell anything. I knew she was doing it to make me laugh, so I'm like trying not to laugh. And he's like, oh no, ma'am, breast implants are fine for this ride. They more mean like a heart implant. She's like, you sure my breast implants are okay? No. She's like, okay, well how do you know? Did they give chimpanzees breast implants and then have the chimpanzees ride this ride? And she's selling it. And he's like, I don't think so. She's like, but are you sure? Can you find out? Because I'm against animal testing, and if chimps had to ride this ride, I need to get off. And I am like, just like, ready to explode. And he's like, I'll go find out. And honest to God, I guess he was gonna go ask somebody. I don't know who he could ask. And she stops him, she's like, I'm joking. And he was just like, whoa, that was probably like the worst day of his life. So anyways, I peed my pants on that ride, and I don't know if it was because I was laughing so hard or because that ride is flippin' terrifying, but that's how she takes a fun day and makes it funny. It was a typical fun day out with my sister Tracy. Oh, for the record, Tracy did not date or marry the attendant at the moment. In any event, I'll never forget that or almost any moment with my witty sister, and even just mundane things are fun. Like I could spend hours on the phone talking with my sister, and we would talk about our day, science, philosophy, and a lot of the times we spent time talking about our screenplay, Cats on a Bus, which unfortunately never got put on paper. But have you ever seen Speed with Keanu Reeves and Snakes on a Plane with Samuel L. Jackson? So combine those two, and that was our movie. So a bus full of cats, and you can't stop. Anyway, it was hilarious. We should have made that movie because it would have won all kinds of awards. Tracy had so many ideas for it that were legit hilarious. Like I just thinking about it makes me laugh. And as some of you may have read in the obituary, she had actually honestly just finished writing a novel. It was the first in what was going to be a trilogy. And it was about, the main character was Ivy. Basically it was a fantasy world, and it was a pirate ship of all women. And so how women were sort of navigating this world, and still a patriarchal world there as well. But it was a great story, and she just finished it and was had finished editing and wanted to get it published. So I'll keep you updated if I'm able to get that published for her. But in the meantime, you can read her stuff on DNA repair. It may not be as adrenaline-provoking or hilarious, but you never know. Don't put it past her, she may have slipped in a few jokes. And also, she was an actress, as you know, so if ever you wanted to see Tracy, you can try going onto YouTube or Googling her. There's some stuff on YouTube that I screenshot for the slideshow, but also like her resume lists different shows that she had little roles in. And I think she did an entire student film as well. Her favorite kind of acting was improv, which you may have guessed. And she actually achieved training and credentials in it, not just that day at Wonderland, but from a legitimate acting school. So in addition to being smart, pretty, funny, not good at sports, Tracy was completely absent-minded. And anyone who knows her can attest to that. It also runs in the family. So Tracy was my maid of honor, I was hers, and one day, my wedding day, myself, my sister, and my daughter, her niece Elise, we had just gone to the nail thing to get our nails done. And as we were leaving, so we're getting into my car, and I couldn't find my phone, and I'm like, oh, I can't find my phone, Trace. And my daughter's like, I'll call it. And my daughter's like, I can't find my phone. And my sister's like, I'll call it. She's like, I can't find my phone, or my keys, or my wallet. So we run back into the nail salon, all three of our phones are there, Tracy's wallet's there, the keys are there. Anyways, that was a typical day for us. Sometimes when Tracy realized she had lost something, she would just kind of scream, she'd be like, ah! And it would startle me. And so we had this like running joke, because something would happen, she'd be like, ah! Or whatever, and then, so I'd scream back intentionally, like, ah! And then she'd scream back intentionally even louder, ah! And so then we were going, sorry, I'm not doing it very good, I shouldn't be screaming here. But we'd scream back and forth, and then we'd laugh, and it was like just our thing. So, one day, we're in Tracy's car, she's driving, I'm the passenger, our mom's in the back seat, and I think it was the Nowaki girls' baby shower in Tiefenbach. Does that ring a bell, about 10 years ago? Anyways, we're going to some kind of baby shower, we're in the car, it's a little bit raining, and I guess she like maybe meant to stop or something, and she's like, ah! And so of course, I do my scream, but like we sell it, like we're screaming, it's scary, it's not like I'm doing now. So I do my scream, then she does her scream, then I do mine louder, then she does hers louder, and then we start laughing, but it's dead silence in the back, so I look back, and our mom is white as a ghost. She's curled up like this, shaking, and she goes, what's happening? That is a true story. We just laughed, because we're a little bit evil. So, continuing on this same drive, maybe we pass some McDonald's and it reminds us of a funny story. She's still in shock, so she's not part of the conversation. And we're talking about how Tracy at one point, she used to call filet-o-fish fillet-o-fish. And so we were like reminiscing on that, and we're like, oh, must have said something along the lines of, oh, that poor cashier must have had to picture, fellatio on a fish. And our mom suddenly came back to life, and she's like, what's fellatio? And my sister that's skipping a beat looks back and she's like, we'll tell you when you're older. And that was a typical car ride with my sister Tracy. Tracy made every moment we spent together a blast. I hope I made her laugh today, but I'm only one half of a comedy duo, and she was the star. I was just always along for the ride, and I'll miss you forever, Tracy.
Lisa had the very coveted role of legitimate sister. However, there were many jealous usurpers waiting in the wings. One of these was Tracy's cousin Heather, who is now going to come up and say a few words.
I'm going to try and get through this as best I can, but I apologize if I can't.
It's okay.
So I just go
Let me stand with you.
Growing up, Tracy and I were extremely close. She was like the sister I never had. And those of you who know me know I grew up with three older brothers, so it was always a blast when we could get together. If there was a get-together, the first thing I wanted to know was, is Tracy there? And if she wasn't, I'd sit and sulk until she was. We were inseparable. We had countless sleepovers, never missed each other's birthday parties, talked about boys, and in our teenage years, did and got away with a lot of things our parents would not approve of, which I'm going to keep those just for me and her. Sorry. When we were little, we used to talk about our weddings and what they would be like. We said we would be in each other's weddings. And fast forward many years later, we did just that. Unfortunately, neither of our marriages worked out, but that's neither here nor there.
It's that condition.
The rest of the family. Now, I could stand up here and literally talk for hours about all the memories I have with Tracy, but I won't. I'll spare you my ramblings. Those who knew Tracy couldn't help but love her and her bubbly personality. She was the life of the party, and she lit up any room she was in. I was looking at pictures to send to Lisa, and there was this picture of her, and you can tell she's laughing in it, and I could hear her laugh when I look at that picture. I really hope I never forget that laugh. And you couldn't help but just laugh along with her. She just had that effect on people. Here's a story that I'm reminded of a lot. When we were kids, Tracy would often come camping with my family, And her and I would share a tent, and we would stay up all hours of the night, and my mom would have to bang on the tent and say, it's time to go to bed, you're keeping everybody awake. And this one night, we were sitting around the campfire, and Tracy and I were bored. So we decided to go for a walk. And I don't know how, and it was probably Tracy's idea, we started telling jokes to other campers. And of course, everyone knows like Tracy was the comedian and I was like there for the ride, right? But people started paying us for our jokes. So we were like, this is amazing. So we didn't think there was anything wrong with that. Like 2 minors just walking around in different campsites. So we went back and we told my parents, like, we got all this money for telling jokes. And my mom sat us down. She's like, 1, you don't talk to strangers. 2, you don't take money from strangers. And all we could think about was getting into the tent and, preparing our act for the next day. We didn't care. There was another time when we were camping, we were sleeping in the tent and an earwig had crawled in, and Tracy and I are hysterically screaming. And my parents came in to see, what was wrong, and Tracy's freaking out, there's an earwig. Well, by the time my parents came to look, they couldn't find it, so Tracy was convinced it had crawled into her ear and was eating her brain. So me being the younger cousin, I thought, oh crap, that's what earwigs do. So I was freaking out. And my parents were trying to assure her that they're not eating your brain, it probably crawled out, but Tracy was not convinced. But as we all know, she went on to earn her PhD, so I don't think it actually did. As Tracy and I got a little older, our sleepovers kind of changed. And Aunt Marty was working late nights, and so her and I would have parties. And we were also supposed to be babysitting Jamie, but like Lisa said, we would just send him up to his room, give him a bunch of toys, and just tell him to stay up there, which he usually did pretty good. He would just stay up there and then eventually go to bed. Well, it was one night, I guess, I don't know, like you knew we had a party. I think we didn't forget to clean up or we left something out or something. And you were convinced, and you thought for sure I would tell the truth. So I can hear Aunt Marty and Tracy upstairs. Tracy's swearing up and down, we didn't have anyone over. And I'm downstairs, literally shaking. I'm like, I think I was like 14 at the time, and I think I had my first beer that night or something. Sorry, Mom, sorry, Dad. And I'm terrified, and Aunt Marty comes downstairs, and she's like, Heather, tell me the truth. Did you and Tracy have a party? And Tracy's literally behind her mom going, and I'm like I said, Tracy was like a sister to me, and I would never rat her out. I always had her back, and I said, no, Marty, we didn't have anyone over. And she bought it, but I think deep down you knew.
We're grounded.
Some of my best memories growing up were with Tracy. I'm so lucky and so grateful for the bond that we had. She accomplished so much in her short life, and she had so much more life to live. The world lost a beautiful soul the day she died. I hope you're resting peacefully. And I hope you're reunited with Jamie. I like to believe you and Jamie are in the arms of our grandpa, who we lost over 20 years ago. But if you're both with Grandpa, I bet he's making you play 52 card pickup, because he thought that was hilarious. You will forever be missed, but I hope you're dancing in the sky. Rest in peace, Tracy, I love you. I love you too.
In addition to many family members who loved Tracy dearly, she also had very many dear friends. Sarah, who was a colleague of Tracy's at McMaster for over 10 years, will now say a few words.
Hi everyone, my name is Sarah, and I was fortunate to carry out my PhD with Tracy in the Genop Lab at McMaster. All of us here from Marie Genop's lab knew Tracy well. She was a part of our academic family, and I'd like to share with you the memories I and my lab mates have of Tracy in our lives. First, Aureen, who worked with Tracy closely when she first joined the lab, and is joining us virtually today, asked me to share the following. Dear Tracy, the world lost a great spirit and scholar. My heart goes out to your family and friends. I wanted to share a memory I had of you, one I cherish to this day. You taught me how to run a radioactive gel. As I was running my first one, I tripped my own 2 feet and radioactive water went flying across our lab. I stood frozen and you were the first person I thought of to call for help. I expected a lecture, but instead you laughed and laughed. You joked about how we're all going to finally have superpowers like Spider-Man, and then you proceeded to go through the cleanup protocol with Sarah. You turned around the situation. You fixed the problem with humor, ease, and speed, and this was how you approached everything in life. Your easy smile, infectious laughter, and spirit will be a loss the world will feel, especially your family and friends. I am so sorry that you were gone too soon. Thank you for the little time you spent with us, Maureen. And also from Wynne, who was one of many undergraduates that Tracy mentored in the lab. She's also asked me to share these memories with you. I wouldn't be where I am in my scientific career without her. I always remember her helping out with experiments when it failed, like the time we tried to grow yeast and all we had were these pink colonies, because I think it turned out our water was contaminated. Or there was the time we purified the wrong protein. Either way, she made me more confident in running my own experiments. All the difficulties didn't stop her, she overcame them. She looked over my thesis and presentation, making sure I never felt underprepared. She would step in to help when I needed something done when I had classes to attend. She also was so kind to the animals, feeding them when we told her not to. I remember that one time she came back from a trip and had to get a tetanus shot because the squirrels bit her fingers. Oh yeah, that's a good point. She was carefree and enjoyed every aspect of life. And from myself, I would like to share these memories of Tracy with you, which has the raccoon.
Oh, they're true stories?
I couldn't remember at the time. There might have
Squirrel, tetanus, and a raccoon?
possibly. It's Tracy. So as anyone here knows, one of the things that stand out about Tracy was her big heart, particularly when it came to animals. We all knew Tracy's love of animals, even at the expense of her own safety. I remember multiple cat scratches from her babies, all up and down her arms, but one of the most memorable displays of her care came after a weekend camping trip. We were in lab meeting and Tracy came back telling us how she'd been camping and was feeding these adorable baby raccoons and their mom, but then of course one of them bit her. Anyhow, we all looked at her and said, shouldn't you get a treatment for rabies? She thought it was completely fine. She didn't need to get it done, but thankfully after a bit more discussion, we were able to convince her to go see a doctor, and she endured the less than fun rabies shots. But that didn't stop her from caring for any stray animals that needed her help. Her big heart extended to people too. It was never an imposition to ask her for help or to talk something over, whether it be personal or professional. She would go all in when we wanted to do something fun. As you may have seen from the pictures from our lab group Halloween costumes, she would paint herself blue to be the Tin Man from The Wizard of Oz, or she found just the right outfit to be Barbie from Toy Story. One of the few times I remember Tracy being selfish, and we're all allowed to be selfish once in a while, was really more out of self-preservation. As a lab, we enjoyed going to Halloween Haunt at Canada's Wonderland, and I think it was the first year we went. We were going through the corn maze, a scarecrow jumped off a hay bale, there may have been somebody with a chainsaw, and Tracy ran for it screaming, leaving the rest of us in the dust. However, with her great sense of humor, she laughed along with us once we all got out, and to be fair, she wasn't the only one who got scared that night. In graduate school, Tracy was fearless. I didn't see it clearly at the time, but looking back now, it was obvious. She always found a way to figure things out. One was navigating her workbench. I was in awe of the mess that was Tracy's bench. As a type A personality, it completely freaked me out, but she knew exactly where everything was and carried out some excellent science on it. She had what was, in my opinion, the most challenging project in the lab at the time, and she tried so many things and she conquered it all. I remember her after one of her last committee meetings where she had been granted permission to defend her thesis. She came in and she was so proud, because there was one set of experiments that her committee said she would need to graduate, but the committee didn't think she was capable of doing it, but she did it. For those in the lab that remember, it was her 2D gels showing hairpins being generated after ICL damage. I had to go look it up in her thesis to remind myself exactly what it was, but it was very impressive. On top of that, she single-handedly brought yeast work into the lab, something no one in our group had done before, and she kept my workbench smelling like fresh bread because it was right beside the incubator where she kept her yeast. This fearlessness carried on past her science days, and it was driven by passion. She was so passionate about what she did, whether it be science or the love of acting she developed during graduate school. I remember her excitement when she had been approached by a talent scout in the streets of Hamilton. She came into the lab and she was just beaming and so excited to tell us the story, as she was after most weekends. She always had great stories, many with you, Lisa, and your family. It was always fun to hear. She took acting classes and pursued this difficult career, as we know acting is not an easy profession, and she did this after already challenging herself with getting a PhD. If she loved it and wanted to do something, she went for it. Tracy was also adventurous. I'm so fortunate to have Tracy as my conference traveling partner, something my mom reminded me of recently. Twice we traveled together to both California and New Hampshire, and she was always up for exploring. And don't worry, Mary, the conferences were good. We attended almost every session. We actually drove together to New Hampshire, and I remember on our way back, it started raining and my windshield wipers stopped working. Tracy stuck her hand out the window and tried moving them to make sure I could see. While we were really fortunate it didn't rain long or hard, she didn't panic or get flustered, but was just curious about why they stopped working and could she continue to move them on her own. I was so glad to have her there. Her sense of humor and seeing the beauty and joy in life was evident on this trip too, and I think there's a trend here of being in cars and screaming, because she saw a sign, and I can't remember what it said, but she yelled out in excitement, scaring the living daylights out of me who was driving, and I might have swerved a bit on the road, but she was just so excited and thought the sign was hilarious. We laughed about it after my heart stopped racing, and laughed about it again when we saw the same sign on the way home. In California, we had a great time, and after the conference, we had a very fun 2 days seeing a few of the sights. Tracy was also very understanding when at Universal Studios, after a particularly tumultuous ride, I needed to walk around slowly to stop the world from spinning, but she was ready to go right back on the same ride again. I hadn't seen Tracy for the last few years. As happens in life, it becomes harder to see friends as you get older, and that virus came and prevented much socializing. But going through something like a PhD, working together every day with the same group of people builds a community, a family if you will, that no matter the time apart, when you come together, small things might have changed. Maybe someone has a new partner or a family has grown, but they're the same, still the same people you work with side by side through the roller coaster ride that is graduate school. You comforted each other through the hardships and you celebrated the wins together. It's a bond that can't be broken and is in strong evidence today by those who are here in person and virtually from the Jenna Lab family. And today we are here to share our sorrows and our loss, but more importantly, to remember the joy that Tracy brought to our group, and that I know she is bringing, surrounded by her cats and her brothers, to wherever she is now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Our next speaker will be Justin, who has been a great friend and support to Tracy these last 6 years.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Justin Kovacic. I come here today to talk about my friend and the woman I love, Tracy Tiefenbach. The first time I saw Tracy in person, I was taken back by her beauty, but was even more captivated by her personality as we continued to see each other over the past 6 years. Just before I get into this, I'll tell you a quick story. When I first met Tracy, we were sitting in a room and I figured out she had some cats because I saw them around her place. But she asked me, how many cats do you think would make a crazy cat person? And I saw 4 cats, but I wisely said, maybe 5? And she said, yes, that's a good number. Any more than 5 is crazy cat lady. And it turned out she had 5 cats. So. What I learned about Tracy is that she was a deeply compassionate person, always there for a friend and wasn't afraid to chase her dreams. She had an infectious passion for life and helped me to explore outside my comfort zone. I'd like to tell you a little about some of the things Tracy liked. Tracy loved music, especially 90s music. Tracy loved lattes, especially the steamy hot ones I would make on a weekend morning. However, neither one of us actually drank coffee a few years ago. This was a relatively new thing for both of us. Tracy also liked hiking, campfires, swimming, barbecues, and going to parks and beaches. She liked watching movies and recently watched a movie called Promising Young Woman and was very impressed by it. Tracy would try anything adventurous. We went ziplining twice. We went on the jet boat in the Niagara Class 5 Rapids. She loved every minute of it. We also went on boat tours of Toronto and Montreal. Actually, I'll tell you a Daryl Horn story before I continue. Tracy asked me if I would drive her to meet a friend to pick up a picture one time. So we drove over there, and then she told me about 2 seconds before we met this guy that it was her ex-husband, and we were signing the divorce papers.
Oh.
So I said, Tracy, a little warning next time, please.
Wow.
COVID-19 was particularly tough on Tracy. She was infected in March of 2020 and was told to stay home unless she was in respiratory distress. I would make weekly grocery and toilet paper deliveries to her apartment, but had to resist hugging her. Eventually, she recovered, but Tracy said it was one of the toughest illnesses of her life. Even during the lockdowns, Tracy worked hard to regain her health and some semblance of normal life. Tracy would try to go hiking every day and even had a makeshift gym at home with exercise bands and weights. I came to see her every weekend during lockdowns, and we went on drives and hikes. Tracy loved to travel. We visited Buffalo once. We also visited Tracy's relatives in Kingston. She had fun canoeing and boat riding in her brother Paul's boat. I saw great joy in her eyes as we raced through the waters of the St. Lawrence River. Tracy and I also had a fantastic time in Montreal this past September. We had a nice hotel suite with a pool, and our days were packed with activity. We went to many museums, and being an artist herself, Tracy really loved the Museum of Fine Arts in Montreal. In fact, the day we went there, we had other plans, but we ended up spending most of the day in the museum. Also in Montreal, we climbed Mount Royal. We set off in the morning thinking it was just a short hike up the mountain, but we found that the stairs seemed to go on forever and ever. We thought we would never find the top. Every time we went around a corner thinking it was the top, there was another set of stairs. But eventually we did make it, and we were relieved that the rest of the journey would be downhill. We were supposed to see a comedy show in Montreal, but I had made an error with the address, and we ended up across town at the wrong place. I wanted to give up and go home, but Tracy believed we could still make it, and we zoomed across the city on subway and foot, and made it just as the first act came on, and I was so glad I listened to her. I love to sit in my backyard with Tracy in the evening and gaze at the stars by a fire. A couple of months ago, we were back there and we actually saw 3 shooting stars in a span of 5 minutes. I love Tracy with all my heart, and I will miss her dearly. The last thing I will say is that even though Tracy struggled, she never gave up, and she never, she kept her spirit alive. Goodbye, Tracy.
Thank you, Justin. As we come to the end, Lisa would like to come up one last time and read a poem authored by Tracy herself. After we listen to Tracy's words, we will have one last opportunity to reflect on all the memories that we've heard today as the song Will You Remember Me by Sarah McLachlan is played.
Actually, before I go up, Chris, did you want to tell me the story? Anyone else from the lab know the story? No? Okay.
So I'm going to read are her words, and it doesn't have a title, so it just says untitled. I called it Untitled Poem. Okay. I've walked the fearful desert strong, and known I've been here much too long. Grieve for me not when I am gone, it's you that I shall grieve. Will I walk this journey of pure dismay, when you can finish just halfway, and end the pain of every day? Are you afraid to leave? Afraid to find another land, one which you don't understand, with twice as much the burning sand, and yet it's just the same. But if when at your destination, you're back again to birth of nation, to face this desert hallucination, and do it all again. Your fingers bleed from cactus pins, just so you can find within water pure without a sin that comes with such a price. You reached out, but scorpions you caught, then reached again since you forgot all the pain that it once brought. It will happen more than twice. As if any of your petty deeds will comfort your heart when it bleeds, and twist your soul out as you plead when you finally fall. No matter how long you remain, or suffer from intolerable pain, you lose everything you gain, and no one will recall. But what if there's a better place, filled with serenity and grace? The burning sun won't lick your face, the wind will stop its blowing. You desert creature with no spine, afraid to leave, to cross the line. But in that frail mind of thine, too weak to keep on going, what does this desert have to bring? But pain from evil's scorpion sting. Mistakes are now the only thing that you can call your own. There is no water, that's the worst. Your blood's so hot, your veins might burst. So slit your wrist to quench your thirst, and I will bring you home.
Don't let your
I'd just like to thank everyone who spoke today. It's certainly not easy. Some of you made us laugh, some of you made us cry. Your heartfelt words helped everyone in this room. You helped everyone remember why Tracy was so loved. You helped us understand why Tracy was so special to each of us. You helped us to understand exactly why Tracy is going to be missed so dearly. Clearly, there are a lot of stories about Tracy. There is no way anyone could get through all of them in an hour. If anyone would like to gather at Rob and Marty's house after the service, you are welcome to. I can certainly give you directions. It is on Nash Road. If anyone looking for parking, there is the church across the street, Gospel Church, has generously offered their parking. As we end our time together, it is my hope that we can all shift our thoughts away from the sadness and heartbreak that we feel to absolute gratitude for how Tracy touched each of our lives and the time that we each had with her. Thank you for being with us today.
120 Nash Road.
What's the address? 120 National.
The address is 120 Nash Road South.
And the street right across the street.